Today we're marking the birthday of a Tudor woman who is so often overshadowed by her more famous daughter, Lady Jane Grey, but who deserves to be remembered in her own right. I'm Claire Ridgway, author, historian and founder of the Anne Boleyn Files, and welcome back to my channel. On this day in history, the 16th of July 1517, Frances Brandon, Duchess of Suffolk, was born. She was the eldest daughter of Charles Brandon, Duke of Suffolk, and Mary Tudor, Queen of France, the younger sister of Henry VIII. That made Frances not only a Tudor by blood, but the niece of King Henry VIII himself. Quite a lineage. Frances was born at Hatfield and christened just 2 days later on the 18th of July. Among those present were Lady Boleyn and Lady Elizabeth Grey, acting as proxies for Queen Catherine of Aragon and Princess Mary. It's possible that Lady Boleyn was Anne Boleyn's aunt, also named Anne, or even her mother, Elizabeth Boleyn. Frances was raised in the royal household close to the court and very much part of that tight-knit circle of elite Tudor women. In May 1533, aged just 16, she married Henry Grey, Marquis of Dorset, who was also 16. A marriage between two young nobles of impeccable pedigree. That same summer, her mother, Mary Tudor, died. Frances, still a teenager, acted as chief mourner at her funeral. Within months, her father remarried, rather scandalously, to Catherine Willoughby, his 14-year-old ward, which must have been quite the adjustment for Frances. Frances and Henry Grey had 5 children, but tragically their first 2 died in infancy. Their 3 surviving daughters were Jane, Catherine and Mary Grey, each of whom would make headlines and sometimes history in their own right. Now, when it comes to Frances, her reputation has taken quite a beating over the centuries. Many portrayals have painted her as a harsh, even abusive mother, thanks in part to a letter written by scholar Roger Ascham. During a visit to the Grey household when Frances was out hunting, he recorded Lady Jane's complaint that she was treated harshly, with pinches, nips and bobs. Author and historian Susan Higginbotham wrote in an article on my blog, The Anne Boleyn Files, and I quote, "The impact of Ascham's recollection on Frances's reputation simply cannot be understated. Historians and novelists alike have used it to construct an image of Jane's entire childhood as more Dickensian than anything that Dickens himself could have imagined, brightened only by Jane's brief stay at Catherine Parr's household. Any possibility that the adolescent Jane, like other intelligent adolescents, might have been exaggerating her complaints, that she might have spoken less harshly of her parents with time and maturity, or that her parents might have had genuine cause by Tudor standards for disciplining her, has been ignored by all but a handful of writers." That's that quote. Susan goes on to explain how in one biography of Jane, and this is a biography, a historian described Frances shaking her infants, and another historian wrote of her cruelty to her servants, yet there's no evidence for that whatsoever. So this single quote has been used to construct an entire narrative of cruelty and paint Frances as an awful woman. In 1553, Frances found herself in the eye of the storm during one of Tudor England's most fraught successions. As King Edward VI neared death, he drafted his device for the succession, which initially aimed to pass the crown to Frances's male heirs. But when it became clear that she wasn't going to have any, he altered it to name her daughter Lady Jane Grey as his successor. Edward died on the 6th of July 1553 and Jane was proclaimed Queen on the 10th of July. However, just 9 days after that, Edward's half-sister Mary claimed the throne as Queen Mary I. Frances, her husband and her daughter were all imprisoned, but Frances was released relatively quickly, having written to her cousin Queen Mary and having distanced herself from the coup. Unfortunately, Henry Grey later joined Wyatt's rebellion, which led to his execution and the tragic death of their daughter Jane in February 1554. She was beheaded with her husband, Lord Guildford Dudley. Despite this, Queen Mary allowed Frances to remain at court, and in 1555 she remarried, marrying her master of the horse, Adrian Stokes. It was a marriage based on love and companionship rather than politics, and they went on to have 3 children, although sadly none survived infancy. Frances lived the remainder of her life in relative quiet, probably aware of how fragile favour and fortune could be at the Tudor court. She died at Richmond on the 21st of November 1559, aged just 42, and she was buried in St Edmund's Chapel, Westminster Abbey, on the orders of Queen Elizabeth I. Her tomb, erected by her husband Adrian Stokes, contains a Latin inscription which reminds us that glory and splendour fade, but virtue remains eternal. And that's how I like to think of Frances Grey. A woman born into immense privilege, caught in the whirlwinds of dynastic ambition, yet someone who showed resilience and grace in the face of personal loss and political disaster. So today, let's remember Frances Grey, not just as Lady Jane Grey's mother, but as a woman in her own right, one who was part of the inner Tudor circle and who had Tudor blood, who navigated royal favour, family tragedy and political upheaval, and who deserves her place in history. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to like, subscribe and click the bell so you never miss one of my fascinating Tudor videos. And I'd love to know in the comments what you think of Frances Grey.